1080!
The Wave Race 64 wasn't setting the sales charts on fire like Super Mario 64 or Mario Kart 64 were. The game was still a consistent seller, so the team at EAD were given the green light to produce another N64 game. EMO expressed interest in doing a snow skiing game. However, during development, they gave snowboarding a go and found it was more fun than skiing. So it was decided that the game would shift to focus on snowboarding, and this turned out to be a godsend. Extreme sports were taking off at the time, and a new wave of titles were about to hit the scene. 1080 was able to get out in front of all these games, which led to another strong seller for the console. And though it would inevitably be overshadowed by Tony Hawk, it's still a decent game that's held up pretty well.
Kensuke Kimachi versus Dion Blaster. Ready? Go!
There's about as much story here as there was in Wave Race 64, as in none really. It's just 5 snowboarders racing each other down a mountain. With that out of the way, let's just get straight into the presentation. Now, I've always been against going for realism in games, especially when we are talking about old hardware like this, but 1080 pulls it off okay. The character models are well put together and expertly animated, careful attention was paid to the colors, and there's some cool particle and dust effects. It all runs pretty well too, despite the detailed graphics and the general speed of gameplay. The sound effects are pretty satisfying too, and I love how you get some nice feedback from the rumble pack when you go to make a tight turn. Love the music as well. It's like Mario Kart if it had a rock vibe. It appeals to the style and tone of the game without dating it with licensed songs. As for the gameplay, one thing you need to understand about 1080 snowboarding is that it is not an arcade style extreme sports game like Tony Hawk or SSX. For starters, the game isn't about tricks but rather racing. It's also a more grounded game, so you aren't going to be launching off a mountain and landing without trouble. The characters are very much human, and their weight and physics are grounded. Really, the challenge of 1080 is mastering and maintaining control as gravity pulls you down the mountain. It's all about the Z button. By holding down the button, your boarder will squat, causing you to pick up speed, but if you want to make those tight turns, you have to let go of the Z button. If you go airborne, you also have to be sure to let go of the Z button and then push it again as you hit the ground in order to cushion your landing. It takes a bit of practice in order to get it down, but once you do, it makes for an intense experience. It really does feel like you're shredding down a mountain at a near vertical angle, and the thrill of sliding around corners, dodging hazards, and landing jumps is exhilarating. That being said, 1080 does have some pretty big shortcomings. I think the obvious problem is that the game has a pretty steep learning curve. I mean, Wave Race 64 has a steep curve too, but it was easier to figure out since it only required the joystick and one button. 1080 is less intuitive, which is bad enough, but the game does a horrible job explaining how to use the Z button. In fact, the train mode doesn't even tell you about the Z button at all. Instead, it teaches you how to do tricks, which serve no purpose in the racing. Yeah, there is a trick mode, but it's not terribly fun. It's nowhere near as smooth as Tony Hawk. It's also short. This was another game I was able to knock out in one sitting, which I actually kind of appreciate. I've got some big games coming up, so it's nice to play something that is short and sweet. Not that it matters how short it is, as 1080 is another N64 game that goes for bargain bin prices. 1080 was a successful game in its day, but as I said, its popularity was short-lived as it just couldn't compete with Tony Hawk or the rash of extreme sports games that would follow in its wake. 1080 would get a sequel on GameCube with 1080 Avalanche, but by this point, SSX had hit the scene and it had found a bigger audience due to its absurd and over-the-top gameplay. 1080 just couldn't compete. Though the franchise was short-lived, Nintendo hasn't forgotten the game as it would be one of the first N64 games to be made available for Virtual Console, and is currently available on Switch Online, which I feel is where it fits best. Take a day, have some fun, and then move on.
Go!